So today we have a treat for you, and on the menu is Pakistan. And I hope you will enjoy the two books that we are discussing today. One is by Ambassador Satish Chandra, and other is by Ambassador D.P. Srivastava. Both have been following Pakistan for decades. Both have served in Pakistan, and both continue to follow the developments very closely. In fact, so closely that I think Pakistan that they have imbibed over the decades, it bubbled over in the form of two books. And I'm sure they felt that their experience and understanding of Pakistan should be shared more widely, and particularly the younger generation. They would benefit a lot from what has been written in these books. I think Pakistan and China, these being two of major adversaries, you can call them threats, they loom large over our lives in some way or the other, every single day, every single moment. And they need to be understood well. And I think these two books will serve that purpose. Also, probably every 20 years, 30 years, 15, 20, every generational change, I think, requires, new generation looks at the events of distant past. Sometimes the memories get fade away, sometimes memories get distorted. So there is a process of rediscovery, which happens all the time. And that is why sometimes you see the history is also reinterpreted. New insights come, new documents emerge. So our understanding of Pakistan, China, and other issues, it continues to evolve. So I think these two books are a great addition to our understanding of Pakistan. And probably it will be a great idea, or it is my hope that the younger generation gets inspired and they begin to look at these issues from their vantage point. That means the vantage point in which now social media and AI and so many other things are becoming more important. And also at a time when the whole world is in a flux and in a churn, and every country is trying and try to adjust to these new realities of a changing world, a world which is kind of the old system is breaking down. And India and Pakistan are no exception. They are also getting adjusted to those realities. But in this time, history becomes very important. So Ambassador Satish Chandra's book, based on his very long experience of dealing with Pakistan in various capacities, that you know that very well, is in some sense a primer. And it takes you through the critical issues in India-Pakistan relations over the years. Some of the issues perhaps are no longer important and only of historical interest, like the Jinnah House issue. But some are very, very relevant and live, like the Jammu and Kashmir or terrorism and many other issues like that. So he builds his story about Pakistan through the India-Pakistan issues lens. And there he has researched all the available literature, many documents, plus his own experience. And as is his wont, put it in the form which is very lucid, very clear, and very insightful. And in some sense, every chapter here can be read alone, and in some sense, a backgrounder. So if you want to know something about Sir Craig and you want to have a first FIR, the first information report of Sir Craig, this is the book to go to. And similarly, many other issues. But I think behind this there is something more than that. And that is, he tries to, shall I say, validate his favorite thesis about Pakistan, and which is the genetics of Pakistan. And the implications is for India-Pakistan relations. What is the future? And that's how we should look at it. Can India and Pakistan be friends? And this is, by the way, I'm taking from one title from Hussain Haqqani's book, which he wrote some time ago. Why can't we be friends? And I think many people have tried to answer that. He has a thesis which is to do with the genetics and maybe genetics engineering, but that is what this book actually leads you to, that there is some genetic flaw in India-Pakistan relations. And of course, astrologers would say कि उसमें के नक्षत्र ठीक नहीं थे, and things were not all right. So as a result, you are suffering that. But nevertheless, we have to look at the future and what do we do with it. I think similarly, Dinkar has also tackled this issue from a different angle, and he's gone away for a change and a refreshing. He's not looking at what did Imran say or what did Shahbaz say or what is Munir saying these days and how all that is there. But he is trying to explain in his book as to why they are saying what they are saying today. Why are these things happening in Pakistan that they are happening? Why is it that Pakistan behaves in a certain way? And he again also in a way goes into the genetics of Pakistan, and he looks at the ideologies, the mindset of the Pakistan. Then he goes back to 19th century and even perhaps earlier also, trying to understand the mindset of Pakistan, the ideology of Pakistan, and why is Pakistan what it is today. And he looks into so many issues. Islam, of course, is very important, but also those who are advocating Pakistan, the Hindu-Muslim angle, those who are advocating Pakistan, whether it is Iqbal or Jinnah and many others. And then after Pakistan became independent and came as a state, the kind of identity crisis that it faced and which continues to face. And I think he looks into a lot of these issues, and I'm sure he's going to talk about it. I think what he's trying to say in the book is that we have to understand the mindset of Pakistan, the ideology of Pakistan, to understand the India-Pakistan relations. So this is also, I think, the two together make a very good contribution to our understanding of Pakistan. And I think we need to do these studies more often, more deeply. And this goes true of the USA and China also. Unless we understand the mindset, the ideologies, what are the deeper impulses which govern their behavior. In other words, in some sense, it is the psychoanalytic understanding of psychoanalytic understanding of Pakistan that these books, in some sense, provide. So, with these words, thank you very much for joining us today. And we have, I think, 2 hours planned for discussion. So I'll request first Satish Chandra ji to introduce his books and maybe for about 20 minutes or so and flag a few issues, because we do want them to come back in the second round based on the questions that are raised here. And then after that, I'll request Dinkar to also introduce his book, and then we can go into a Q&A. So thank you very much. Now I request Satish.
Thank you. Thank you, Arvind, for that very perceptive introduction. And you mentioned that this was going to be a treat on Pakistan. All of us on this platform have been going through the street, Arvind, when he was a very young officer in the mid 80s, and we were working together. The treat started for him at that point in time. And ever since, anyone who deals with Pakistan gets somehow hooked onto it. And the same is true also of Dinkar, my very good friend. He actually served in Pakistan, in Karachi, in extremely difficult circumstances and had some interesting encounters with the ISI. I, of course, have also been dealing with Pakistan for a very long time. I actually, for me, it comes naturally because I'm from that part of the world, from Multan. I was born in Lahore. So it's in my blood, if you like, this treat of Pakistan. And Arvind, when he wants to pull my leg, he says, you know, Pakistan is your favorite country. So now getting down to my own book itself, and before I do that, let me express my appreciation for this book launch having been organized by VIF, and it's only appropriate that this was done for two reasons. First, because the genesis of this book arose from a conversation in this very building between Arvind and myself on the need for such a book, and I'll go into that later. But the second thing is the entire arrangements for its publication, from the cover to proofreading and 1,001 things that go into publishing a book are all courtesy the VIF under the guidance of its secretary, Ms. Anutama Ganguly, who really looked into everything. So the fact that this book is here is in large measure also due to her. Arvind rightly said that the book is essentially a primer, meant to be a primer. It's certainly not a history of India-Pakistan relations. And this primer attempts to analyze the various disputes which have bedeviled ties between our two countries, whether it is a question of minorities, whether it is a question of evacuee property, whether it is Junagadh, terrorism, Kashmir, etc., the many, many issues that are there. And it was felt, and that's where our conversation went between Arvind and myself, that actually there is no single book to our knowledge which does this thing. Lots has been written on Pakistan, on the relationship over the decades, over the years. Lots has been written about individual issues, whether it is water or Kashmir or any of the other things, but nowhere is there a sort of a compendium. And I felt this gap when when Arvind and myself were working together in Delhi in the mid 80s on Pakistan, that really to get the material, you had to do research yourself, which is always difficult when you are working in an executive capacity because you're just rushed off your feet, you don't have time. So this book will, I think, be of use to the layman, of course, but also to the specialist who is digging deeper into issues. And I have written it from a practitioner's point of view. I think Dinkar's book, which is a wonderful book also, is more cerebral. It is written on the basis of original research, much of it. My book is a book which has been developed from available material that I could lay my hands on with the help of the VIF because some material wasn't available to me also. But I used to press them and I usually got it. As regards unpublished and unknown material, it is there only in two chapters where I happened on a personal basis to be able to get material which is inserted, which is not yet published. Much of it is not yet published. The next point I wanted to make, and I confess quite unabashedly that this book presents an Indian narrative. It does so not only because I firmly believe in that narrative, but it is a matter of regret to me that unfortunately, over the decades, we have been somewhat reticent in presenting our own narrative. And that is, I think, very, very unfortunate, because as a result of that, our case on a variety of issues has tended to go by default. I will cite two examples, and this is in the actual practice of diplomacy where our case went by default. One is the Kashmir issue. And here it is significant that we thought it fit at that point in time to take it to the UN Security Council under Chapter 6 of the UN Charter for Pacific settlement of disputes. And as a result, what our delegate at that time in the UN Security Council, Sir Gopalaswamy Iyengar, who was Minister without Portfolio, merely sought immediate stoppage of fighting and withdrawal of the invaders. Any other country in similar circumstances would have had recourse to Chapter 7 of the UN Charter for acts of aggression and would have called for condemnation of Pakistan for aggression and imposition of sanctions against it. We did not do so. And Sisir Gupta, in his well-known tome on this issue, argues that we wanted to keep the door open for good relations with Pakistan. Similarly, in a completely different field, many years later, through the 50s, in negotiating the Indus Waters Treaty, and I'm glad that Uttam Sinha, who I maintain is one of our finest experts on water-related issues, will bear me out, that while we were entitled to about 40% of the Indus waters, we requested for much less. It was in the range of 24 to 25%, and we got 20%. The point to be noted in both cases, and there are many others, that if you don't stand up for your rights, you're never going to get them. And if you do not clearly express your narrative as you should, you will suffer for it. And Arvind spoke of genetics, it is true. It is, I think, unfortunately, and I see it again and again and again, a problem in the Indian DNA, that we have a tendency not to stand up firmly for our position, to be overly accommodative. And in the case of Pakistan, that has certainly been the case, and unwilling to push a narrative. I think this book, at least my motivation partly, was to correct this trend, and a lot of my own colleagues in the Foreign Service, I think, are guilty of what I consider wrongdoing on this point. In the process of analyzing the issues of discord between India and Pakistan, the book tries to tease out the starkly contrasting policies which have been constants of the two countries towards each other. I'll start first with Pakistan. From the beginning, It has been animated by a visceral hostility towards India. It has made issues out of non-issues. It has had a fetish for observing double standards. It has been committed to a maximalist agenda, and Pakistan doesn't negotiate. It presents its agenda and will budge at best 1% from that negotiation. And I have personal experience on this because I have been involved in innumerable negotiations with that country. It has repeatedly violated agreements and has been a consummate player of the victim card, attempt at painting India as a villain by the strategy of suppressio veri and suggestio falsi, and even outright lies. I'll give you a few examples of some of the things I mentioned. Visceral hostility. When I was in Pakistan in the 90s, I had some interaction with Asghar Khan, who was a retired air marshal. And he admitted openly, in fact, he wrote about it subsequently. All wars with India, we have started. It is Pakistan that has started these wars. Second, we talk of trade and bhai and good relations. Yes, wonderful, normally. India has repeatedly offered MFN to Pakistan. It never came about. Why? Zia went on to admit, and there were letters and communications both with Yahya and with Zia. Yahya one was very upfront straight away. He said, till you sort out Kashmir, forget trade. Zia, he went through the motions of trade. In fact, there was a normalization which took place post Simla, after when Bhutto was there and then when Zia came. And in that process, there were fond hopes on this side, certainly. On the other side, they were expressed, but we should take everything the other side says with a pinch of salt. When trade started off, around 77 or thereabouts, the idea was that MFN would come and we would open up trade, etc. And ultimately, Zia confessed. He said, look, even if Indian goods are cheaper, we would rather import from a third country. He was upfront about it, and thereafter we know the story on trade. Issues out of non-issues. That's the second point I made. Take Jinnah House. Jinnah House is a very lovely property in Bombay on Mount Pleasant Road, very close to the chief minister's and the secretariat's secretary's residence and so on. It's a 2.5 acre property. It's currently valued at 2,500 crores. This was evacuee property, which meant that Pakistan had no rights on it. However, throughout, they've been trying to get Jinnah House. And in the earlier years, because I was involved in some of the negotiations on Jinnah House, they said, look, okay, you've taken it over, etc., etc. But we can't get a property in Bombay for our consulate, so please lease it to us. And actually, there was serious thought given to that. And ultimately, we decided for security reasons not to do so. But Imran Khan came fairly recently as Prime Minister, and he said, Jinnah House is ours. I mean, this is an issue being made out of what is clearly a non-issue. All properties left by Indians in Pakistan were harpoed, if I may use that word, since I'm talking about my favorite country. They were taken over by them. None of us, there was a squeak from anybody. So this is issues out of non-issues. You take Junagadh. You know, Pakistani maps till today show Junagadh as a part of Pakistan. And Imran Khan again went on to say that, yes, Junagadh is Pakistan's. And in fact, they took us to the UN on this issue in the late 40s. So that is that. Double standards. I mean, anyone who has, Shalini is here, she'll bear me out. Anyone who has dealt with Pakistan can pick these things out immediately. Uh, Pakistan very readily accepted Junagadh's accession to Pakistan by the ruler, but he would refuse to do so when Hari Singh did the same. A double standard. You take Kalat, and you take, in fact, go back to Jinnah himself. He persistently sought accession to Pakistan of any number of princely states in India, all along our western borders, Jodhpur, etc. And invariably he did so, and he stated categorically that the ruler of a state has a right to declare independence or right to join any, either India or Pakistan. However, Hari Singh, he refused. Not only that, and this is something which is outside the context of what some of us read. Take Khan of Kalat. The Khan of Kalat, Kalat is really the central thing for Balochistan. There are any number of subsidiary states which are part of it. In the case of Kalat, Jinnah was the advocate for the Khan of Kalat pre-independence. And he stated in conformity with what I mentioned here, said later, that all the princely states can have their independence if they wish to. It is within their rights. We, of course, objected to that. But in the case of Kalat, he fought their case vis-a-vis the British. And Kalat was declared independent and, in fact, had an embassy in Karachi after Pakistan's independence. But again, Jinnah in October 47 told the Khan that, you have to accede to Pakistan. And there was a big dust up. Ultimately, he invaded Kalat in March of 48 and took over Kalat. I mean, these are double standards. These double standards extend all the way to the entire relationship. Another thing, in 1959, Pakistan objected to our efforts at a boundary settlement with China. But in March 1963, they went further. They ceded the whole of the Shaksgam Valley. Mind you, Jammu and Kashmir is a part of India. But they ceded the Shaksgam Valley to China. There was no negotiation. I mean, there was a negotiation with them, but they ceded it. I mean, the extent of double standards is amazing. Maximalist agenda. And here one can only laugh. On the Ganga waters, which I haven't dealt with in the book, because it's more related to Bangladesh, and earlier it was a part of Pakistan. There was a very serious disagreements we had with East Pakistan on that issue. And when Pakistan was negotiated on their behalf, the total flow of the waters at Farakka is about 55,000 cusecs. Guess what the demand of the Pakistanis put up on that? It was 49,000 cusecs of water. In the sense, they wanted virtually all of it. You don't negotiate like that. You take Indus waters. In the negotiations, our discussions with them, in those, they said any accretion of water that comes as a result of this treaty, it should be weighted 10-1 in favor of Pakistan. You take Kashmir. During the Swaran Singh Bhutto talks, India offered 1,500 square miles of territory, additional territory, to Pakistan during those talks. Our backs were to the walls. We were being pressurized, as we always are, by the West. And we are accommodative, as I said, that's a part of our DNA. Pakistan could have got them. They could have got them even earlier, in fact, that additional territory which we were prepared to give. Bhutto said no. What he demanded was almost the whole of Kashmir. And this maximalist agenda is something which is not just with us. You take presently Afghanistan. Why have the peace talks failed? They have failed because, you know what Pakistan says? Again, double standards is there, but we can all guess what those double standards are. But why have they failed? Because Pakistan has told Afghanistan that any incident of terrorism that occurs in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is NWFP, you are responsible and we will hold you responsible for that. I mean, this sort of agendas, if you negotiate, how do you expect a solution? Violation of agreements, I think this we all know. All ceasefire agreements across the LOC have been violated consistently by Pakistan. And again, water is something which I'm interested in. I'm influenced by Uttam all the time. You have in May 1948, which many do not know, it's deep history. There was an inter-dominion agreement between India and Pakistan on the waters, whereunder we agreed to allow them to use the waters of the eastern rivers till we have a permanent settlement, but at a certain cost. That cost was never paid to us. Ultimately, it only got resolved in 1960 when we got a part of our dues. Similar agreement, bilateralism, they've reneged on that. And the ultimate, I don't know why we did it, again, it's our DNA, pre-partition debt. India had huge pre-partition debts. India then was India and Pakistan. India agreed to take over Pakistan's pre-partition debt and handled it on the condition that it would be repaid to India in 50 installments commencing 1952, I think August 1952. We haven't got that. They just didn't pay it. But they had agreed to pay it, and it's on that basis that we did so. My own thesis on this, and I have mentioned this in the book, that Pakistan, in fact, got an economic bonanza from partition. And I'll tell you why. They have always played, as I said, a victim card. We got a raw deal at partition, etc., etc. I would suggest that they got an economic bonanza. They got the area which was canal irrigated in Punjab. And that was the most fertile area in terms of agricultural production. And it was the granary of India, Western Punjab, which came to Pakistan. And to give you an example of the differential, on the Indian side, Indian Punjab had an irrigated area of only 3.8 million acres. On the Pakistan side, it was 19.5 million acres. Water utilization on the Indian side was around 8 million acre feet. On the Pakistan side, it was 64 million acre feet. And that's why I think the Indus Waters Treaty, apart from the disorientation in terms of sharing of waters, we got 20, they got 80%. But the fact is that the irrigation works that were to have been done, the focus should have been on this side, which was the deprived side. And that never happened. Property is left behind. Hindus and Sikhs, it was the biggest migration in history at one stroke in 1947. You know what happened? An agreement was to have been there on evacuee property. The property is left behind by Hindus and Sikhs. And from this side, the Muslims who went. The property and at an official level, there was an understanding that on the immovable property, particularly in rural areas, what would happen is that the properties would be taken over by the states, and whatever was the imbalance in the properties, those would be given in a graduated manner by whichever state got more. At an official level, there was an understanding to that extent, but at a political level, it went for a 6. Jinnah commented that we don't want Pakistan to be in debt to Hindu India forever. And the reason is simple. The reason is that the disparity was 5:1. The properties left behind by Hindus and Sikhs in Pakistan was 5 times the value on this side. I will now go on to say a little bit on the Indian side. There's much I could say on the other points, but I'm running out of time. On our side, there was no such hatred towards Pakistan. And wanting a good relationship with Pakistan, we were ever on a lookout for a compromise, and we had no such maximalist agendas. In doing so, I think we displayed a lack of realpolitik, which went against our national interest. And despite Pakistani recalcitrance, barring partly under the Modi regime for the last few years, we have been reluctant to take punitive action. Okay. Lack of realpolitik. It's interesting that prior to independence, while Jinnah was wooing X number of Indian princely states for accession to Pakistan, in the case of Kashmir, India did 0. Mahajan, who was the prime minister from 15th October for a few weeks in Pakistan, met the entire Indian leadership, including Gandhiji, including Patel, and including Nehru. None showed an interest in the accession of Jammu and Kashmir to India, much less suggest that Hari Singh be persuaded to do so. In fact, and I have a telling quote by V.P. Menon's classic on this issue, which is the integration of Indian states, which all of us, I think, should read. He writes about Kashmir, and I'm quoting this: "We left the state alone. We did not ask the Maharaja to accede. I simply had no time to think of Kashmir." So that is the Indian approach to Kashmir. On Kashmir's accession to India, and now I talk after the instrument of accession was signed, after we went to war with Pakistan, there have been n number of times where we have been ready to go to third-party negotiation. N number of times, and this is really a lack of real politics. The state has acceded to you. It is legal. Why do you think about these things? We have done so in the past. We've been constantly negotiating on Kashmir. It's done and dusted. It's over in history. It's unfair to the people of Kashmir. But still we can continue on that. Lack of realpolitik. I spoke of Kalat. After Kalat had got independence, it asked India, Azad and others, that why don't you allow us to open a consulate or a consul in India, a trade mission in India? We refused. We just didn't want to do anything about it. Durand Line. This is not a dispute between India and Pakistan, but I have felt it necessary to include it because it should be a dispute. Why I say this is that the Durand Line was never meant to be a boundary line between Pakistan and Afghanistan. And it also abuts on Kashmir. That's why it should be a dispute between us. And here, the Afghans are right. They have never recognized the Durand. They have objected to it throughout. In fact, they objected to Pakistan's admission to the United Nations on this issue because Pakistan insists that the Durand line is a justified frontier between the two countries. And here I say it should be a dispute because it abuts on Jammu and Kashmir and it concerns us. And our position, which we have never taken a position on this issue. Our position, given our very friendly ties with Afghanistan, is really, it is what did the Durand line do? It divided a part of Afghanistan and gave it the Pathan populated part and gave it to Pakistan as an area of influence, not as a boundary. Sir Mortimer Durand, who did this line, stated clearly, this is not meant to be a boundary. This is demarcation of an area of influence. That's it. So our view should be whatever is the Afghan view, because we have friendly, long-standing, historic ties with that country. One last thing I will mention on lack of realpolitik, which haunts us to this day. I will not mention the Indus Waters Treaty because that is there and I've spoken about it. So I won't repeat it. But on the question of prisoners of war, very few people, certainly the Pakistanis, don't give us credit for that. And that is that we took 93,000 prisoners of war in the 71 conflict. And we imported them to India to be looked after in India. Unfortunate. I was actually looking after them. I was undersecretary at that time, so I was handling the POW issue. It was an unfortunate decision because we should have left them there to handle the Bangladeshis to handle them. Of course, many would have been killed. But in terms of realpolitik, it would have made the divide between Pakistan and the newly emerged Bangladesh permanent. We went further. We influenced Bangladesh to permit their release. They were under the joint control of India and Bangladesh. We did influence them that you release them, we need good relations with. And in fact, I've referred in my book to a very detailed discussion on this between Mr. Haksar, Secretary to PM, and Mujibur Rahman and others. Mr. Dixit, incidentally, recorded the minutes of that meeting, in which the Bangladeshis really were not very happy about that. And we exerted enormous pressure, not only on that, but also on the issue of war crime trials of about 189 of those POWs who were engaging in war crimes. They were supposed to have been tried, but Indian pressure prevailed and the rest is history. Had it happened, this sort of rapprochement that is going on, which is actually aimed directly at India, would probably never have been possible. The last thing I'll say is on India's concessions to Pakistan. And each time I think about it, I'm surprised. And this is a part of what I said is how we have bent over backwards. While we are at war with Pakistan in Kashmir, we pay them 75 crores. Mahatma Gandhi went on a fast for a part of that, 50 crores, which was really the balances in the two countries. We were due to pay them that. But while you are fighting, should you have paid it? And for good measure, the Reserve Bank of India from its issue and banking departments paid another 228 crores. This while a conflict is on. You can say, yes, it's justified, you need to pay X, Y, Z. But do you need to pay that while you're fighting? Which country which is at war with another will pay it money? I don't think any country would do that ever. I mentioned the pre-partition debt, estimated at 300 crores. You can talk of the Simla Agreement, which was an outright concession. We didn't even get a settlement on Kashmir. Compare it to what the Allies did with Germany in terms of the Versailles Treaty. This treaty was a treaty not between a victor and a vanquished. It was between equals, with us bearing Pakistani pressure. That's how the treaty was negotiated. We gave back territory. We gave back over 5,000 square miles of territory. And the POWs, which didn't happen during Simla. It happened a few months later, about a year later or thereabouts. Most recently is, which we are still suffering from, 2011, trade with Pakistan. We made special concessions where the EU wanted to allow duty-free import of Pakistani products like textiles, which compete with ours and those of Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and many other countries, because they wanted to help Pakistan at that point in time. It was 2011, that was the Manmohan Singh government. And we could have objected to it under WTO regulations. We did not. We allowed it, and the loss, according to one of the persons involved in the trade, was to the extent of around $1 billion annually to India. So these were concessions which we could, if had we objected, duty-free import would not have been there. Indian products, apart from Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, etc., would also. So I will conclude there, Arvind, but I would like to leave our guests with 3 quotations. One from Nehru, one from Shastri, and one from Jaswant Singh Ji over a wide span of period, where interestingly, all 3 agree with what I am projecting about this hatred towards India. So first, Nehru, and this is a quotation of part of a talk that he gave in the Lok Sabha in April 1958. The feeling of conflict between India and Pakistan is not due to the Kashmir issue, not due to the Kashmir issue, is not due to canal waters or any other issue, but that all these issues are due to another essential conflict, something else. They are the outcome of that. And then he goes on to add, if this type of approach, this type of anti-India approach, hatred of India, bitter dislike of India, which is propagated in the press, in the statements of leading people in Pakistan, continues, and if that is the basis of their foreign and internal policy, then it doesn't matter what you say. Shastri Ji, much terser, much shorter, April 65, again in law. Prime reasons for Pakistan's irrational behavior is the obsessive hatred against India, which Pakistani leaders, Pakistani press, communal fanatics in Pakistan have worked into their system over the past 2 decades. And finally, Jaswant Singh. And this is in a book he wrote, India at Risk. Pakistan's main policy plank was, in quotes, perpetual and induced hostility towards India. And going on, he quotes Zia, who, when asked about Pakistan's cultivated and induced hostility towards India, stated that, and this is a direct quote, Turkey or Egypt if they stop being aggressively Muslim, will remain exactly what they are, Turkey and Egypt. But if Pakistan does not become aggressively Islamic, it will become India again. Amity with India will mean getting swamped by the all enveloping embrace of India. And this is a fitting note I finish on, because Dinkar's book, which deals with the ideology of Pakistan, will really take it forth here from what Jaswant Singh was saying. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, sir, for introducing that book and your thoughts on Pakistan. I think during your presentation, you described the key essential contours of Pakistan and almost defined Pakistan and India-Pakistan relations rather. Double standards, maximalist agenda, violation of agreements, victimization card. So it kind of gives you the framework. And of course, these three quotes from Nehru, Shastri, and Jaswant Singh about perpetual hostility and anti-Indianism and hatred towards India also add to the definition of Pakistan. So we'll carry on these discussions, but I missed one part of the program, which was the release of the books. So maybe first we do the release of the books and then I'll ask Dinkar to take over. So, and I also want to welcome our publishers here. Rajan Arya is here, and I think Bloomsbury is also here. Yeah, please. So, Dinkar, what do you?
Thank you, Edwin, for giving me this opportunity. And my thanks also to VIA. And let me begin by paying my tribute to Ambassador Satish Chandra, who has spent a lifetime, and his work, his latest book, I think will be a very useful reference work for generations of foreign service and outsiders. I have gone through some of the chapters, and it was really an education. My book, Pakistan, Ideologies, Strategies, and Interests, it looks at some of the deeper impulses behind that country's creation. It also examines some of the assumptions or the stereotypes. There's this Aisha Jalal theory that Pakistan was an accidental creation, that it was what Muslim League or Jinnah wanted was a homeland for Muslims, not an Islamic state. There's also this, Hussain Haqqani's book, Between Mosque and the Military. There's a binary now missing, and what I've tried to bring out is that both Aisha Jalal thesis and the binary posed by Hussain Haqqani, these are false binaries. When you say between mosque and the military, you leave out the civilians. Now, Pakistan's Islamization was started by the civilians, the Muslim League leaders. Objectives Resolution of 1949, which was an imprint for an Islamic Pakistan, was adopted under Liaquat Ali Khan. There's also, repeated questions why there is democracy so weak in that country, why plurality has been completely rejected. Is this something purely coincidental or there's something more to it? Now, let me begin by General Asim Munir's speech of 16th April. This is a week before Pahalgam. And he exhorted his audience, you go and remind your grandchildren that they belong to a superior ideologies. He also mentioned two-nation theory, but two-nation theory is a minor subset of the ideology of Pakistan. Two-nation theory is anchored in hostility to what they call Hindu India. Once they had achieved almost, a Pakistan, a Muslim majority state, and then later almost a Muslim only state, they should have come to an end. But the religion continues to play a major role. Two-nation theory also does not explain what Pakistan is doing to its western neighbor Afghanistan, which is a Sunni Muslim country, what it has done to Shia Iran, and what it is doing to its own people, the Pashtun, the Baloch, the Sindhis, and the Muhajirs. So, the ideology of Pakistan has a wider remit. Now, General Ayub Khan, almost 50 years before Asim Munir, in his memoirs described ideology of Pakistan is Islam. Now, there's more to it. It is also Urdu, it is army, it is denial of democracy, it is denial of plurality. Now, I'm making these assertions. I have shown on the basis of Pakistani sources, not Indian sources. I'll bring this out. According to Pakistan's official historiography, there are three major figures who shaped the idea of Pakistan. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, Iqbal, and Jinnah. There's a fourth figure, which his contribution, Pakistani establishment is very reticent to admit, and that is Maulana Maududi, founder of Jamaat-e-Islami, and he has played no less a role. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was the product of the period which saw the demise of Muslim power in India. The War of 1857, which is also called by British historians as Ghadar or Mutiny. 2 years after this event, he wrote a book called Asbab-e-Baghawat-e-Hind, The Reasons for the Indian Mutiny. And in this book, he was extremely critical of the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar. He sarcastically called him Delhi ka Badshah, King of Delhi, not the Emperor of India, or went so far as calling him the deposed King of Delhi. He was even more harsh on Hindu and Muslim soldiers who had fought together to restore the authority of the last Mughal emperor. The Hindu soldiers did not hark back to some Hindu period. They were fighting to restore the authority of Muslim emperor. And Syed Ahmad Khan called them Namak Haram. Namak Haram, as you know, is a highly derogatory term. It means one who has betrayed. Whom did they betray? Bahadur Shah Zafar was the sovereign of India. They were fighting for the sovereign, their sovereign. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's loyalties become clear because he keeps on talking of East India Company as our government. Now, 20 years later, in a famous speech in Meerut in 1888, he said, Hindus and Muslims are two different nations. In the event of departure of the British, unless one has conquered the other and subdued it, there will be no peace between them. Now, these two strands of Sir Syed Ahmad's philosophy, that is connivance or collaboration with the colonial master and antagonism to the indigenous majority, they would describe the politics of Muslim League, which was formed a little later. Sir Iqbal, he, in his famous address of 1930 as president of Muslim League in Allahabad, he said that in Islam, church and state are integral to each other. He was giving thought to the idea, which you are aware, that Pakistan was supposed to be, is based on religion. He went on to say that to decry nationalism. Now, this was very strange. Nationalism was sweeping much of Asia and Middle East at the time. This is 1930. Sir Iqbal explained in that speech why was he criticizing nationalism, territorial nationalism, nationalism anchored in land, in the territory or watan. He said that this would weaken the Islamic unity. He gave the example of Reformation in Europe, which he said has weakened the power of Vatican over Christian principalities, and over next 200 years, it weakened the role of religion within each state. Iqbal said he did not want this fate to befall Islam. Now, there's a telling convergence between Iqbal's thoughts and Maududi's thoughts. Iqbal is considered a great poet. Aisha Jalal, in one of her talks, described him as, an enlightened, Roshan Khayal. That is the term she used. Maududi, the Pakistani establishment doesn't like to mention because he had opposed the creation of Pakistan. But both of them were opposed to Ahmadiyyas being considered Muslims. Iqbal called for Ahmadiyyas to be declared non-Muslims. And under Maududi, Iqbal had passed away. There was a street agitation. So this, if he was not willing to admit plurality within the fold of Islam, how would he have accepted plurality between different religions? Parvez Huda Boy, this is a very well-known Pakistani commentator in a book which came out a couple of years ago. He has pointed out, the dichotomy or the gap between his Urdu writings and English writings. In Urdu writings, he celebrates the glories of Islam, and he pits Muslims as lonely warriors against the rest of the world. Now, an example of such writing is, this is the exact translation, who has smashed the idols of worship? Who has cut the armies of the unbeliever? Now, it is, as he has pointed out, it is no coincidence that Iqbal is celebrated both by Pakistan Army and the Taliban. Today they are ranged on the opposite side, but they celebrate it because both have the same idea. Now we come to Jinnah, and Jinnah is known for his statement of two-nation theory. This is 1940 Lahore Resolution. As I pointed out, he was repeating what Sir Syed Ahmad Khan had said in 88 speech at Meerut. Now, these three strands of the ideology, they continue to be reinforced after partition and independence by a succession of events. First major milestone was Objectives Resolution. The Objectives Resolution was introduced by Liaquat Ali Khan 6 months after Jinnah died. The preamble said, the sovereignty of Allah Almighty extends over the entire universe, and His authority is delegated to the state of Pakistan through its people. Now, three implications follow. If divine is sovereign, this goes against the basic principle of democracy, where the people are sovereign and they delegate the sovereignty to parliament. Second, that in a country where the constitution is based on the religion of the majority community, it places the minority rights on a very weak perch. And third, Objectives resolution went on to say that the state is enjoined to enable Muslims to order their lives in accordance with tenets of Quran and Sunnah. Now, this gave the state a role in the personal domain of the lives of members of the majority community. And this is what Pakistan is living through. When the Pakistani liberals, they complain, there was a silence when it was, the minorities were being, there was an ethnic cleansing. But now it is hurting the majority community. Now, the next milestone was the Munir Commission in 1953. There were anti-Ahmadiyya riots led by Maududi, Jamaat-e-Islami. Army was called out. Government appointed Munir Commission, the then Chief Justice of Punjab, who later became Chief Justice of Pakistan. Munir grilled Maududi. He said that आपने तो पाकिस्तान, आप तो पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ थे, you are opposed to Pakistan, now you've become its champion and you are doing all this. Maududi's reply was telling, and I have quoted in my book the exact quotations. I don't have the time to read it. Maududi said that he thought that Pakistan, like India, will be a mixed state, in which Hindus and Sikhs will be 26% of the population. Munir put this figure higher at 28%. Maududi said that in East Pakistan, their share would have been higher, 35%. Now, West Pakistan is today's Pakistan. Now, Maududi, at the conclusion of his testimony, said, now they are all gone. Now, within a few years of country's creation, 26% of the population was gone. Now, I have brought out the figures from official census of Pakistan of 1951. Actually, this change took place by 1951 when the 26% population of Hindus and Sikhs of minorities in West Pakistan, which is today's Pakistan, had shrunk to 3%. Now, to give you an example from contemporary politics, Trump's policies are being criticized. In US, Latin Americans are 16%, African Americans are 12%, together 28%. If they are reduced to 3% in 4 years, wouldn't that be called ethnic cleansing? Which is what has happened and we have forgotten. The next major milestone, which, the minorities continue. Now, the 3% minority which is left does not pose any threat to any government. But there were no elections till 69, 70. When the elections started taking place, 80s, 90s, and so on, under Zia, he introduced separate electorate. This was abolished by Musharraf. Now, what Musharraf has brought out has in no way improved the minorities' situation. Under this situation, while the majority community, the minority members can take part in elections, but the minority seats are distributed to political parties in proportion to their share in the total vote. And the minority representative against those minority seats are selected by party leadership. So what does it mean? It means that minorities have no right to decide their political affiliation, number one. And they have no right even to select their representative, which are selected for them by party leadership. Now, this ideology has also affected the foreign policy. There's a difference, however. When it comes to distant issues, there are important partners like US or, Pakistan has a very pragmatic policy. It effortlessly made a switch from the West to China. But when it comes to immediate neighborhood, India and Afghanistan, the ideology's role is very pronounced. And this let me bring out by giving you the example of Afghanistan. There are two features of Afghan policies, Pakistan's Afghan policies. One is Durand line, which Ambassador Satish Chandra gave the background. And the second is the theory of strategic depth. Now, the Durand line, Sahibzada Yaqub Khan, in an interview to Ahmad Rashid, who's written the book Taliban, well-known Pakistani commentator, he said that Pakistani generals never pressed for recognition of Durand line when they had the Mujahideens under their control in 80s and 90s. And the reason was that Pakistani generals realized that with Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, Pakistan's scope or the sphere of influence had expanded. So they wanted porous borders so that Pakistan's powers could reach Afghanistan and through Afghanistan to Central Asia. So their insistence on Durand line depends on the political situation of the period. In 47 they insisted, and they are insisting now. But when they were in control of the situation, they wanted porous borders. Now the second part, which is the theory of strategic depth, which essentially means they don't have enough depth to disperse their nuclear assets they needed, and therefore they should have some influence over Afghanistan. When you claim that your neighbor's front lawn is your backyard, you must also have your neighbor's consent. Has Pakistan ever sought Afghanistan's consent in claiming that Afghanistan is giving it the strategic depth? This is nothing but no Afghan government has had problems with India, and every Afghan government has a problem with Pakistan. So this theory of strategic depth was conceived, and it has been propagated only to it's only a camouflage for policy of a sphere of influence. Now, if neither Durand line nor strategic depth explains Afghan policy, is there a third element? And this Riaz Muhammad Khan, who was at one time Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, he has written an extremely interesting book. And he has mentioned this is the reverse indoctrination of ISI and the army. The army used Mujahideens. They indoctrinated them and used the Mujahideens against Soviet Union for Pakistan's territorial interests. But in the process, they themselves developed the reverse indoctrination. They developed their sympathies with the Taliban. And this is the reason why you see this conflict. TTP, Pakistan's official position is that Taliban are hovering TTP and therefore we have a problem. TTP is a small organization. Taliban are in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is 1/6 of Pakistan. They can't threaten Pakistan. The problem is internal, that there is sympathy for the Taliban and the Taliban philosophy within Pakistan, within army, and within ISI. And this is why they cannot take action. You can't fight your own shadow. Now the armies everywhere are supposed to defend national borders. In Pakistan, army also considers itself as the custodian of ideology of Pakistan. It has also shaped that ideology. But let's look at it has used Islamic idioms in all the three wars, 48, 65, 71, 99. You're familiar with it, so I'll not go through it. But let's look at some of the assumptions underlying Western policy towards Afghanistan. One of the major assumptions at the time of partition was the British had, and they succeeded in influencing American opinion, that Pakistan would be a pro-West state, and within Pakistan, army, which was westernized army, will be a bulwark against Islam. Now, both the assumptions proved flawed. In 1991, Pakistan's serving army chief, General Mirza Aslam Beg, when West was fighting and the Arab countries, monarchies, Gulf monarchies were fighting for their survival against Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, General Mirza Aslam Beg called for strategic defiance of the West. So the basic assumption underlying the Western support is deeply flawed. Now, the other aspect which we all know, but let me give some more details. This is about Pakistan's support to terrorism. Terrorism is there in different geographies, but in case of Pakistan, it is an instrument of policy. Now, this is brought out by a book by Brigadier S.M. Rizvi. This is part of the text in Military Staff College, Quetta. And in this book, Brigadier Rizvi has said that terrorism is not only a means to an end. Terrorism is the end in itself. This is the decision we want to impose on the enemy. Now, the foreword of this book was written by none other than General Zia. And General Zia in his foreword said he commended the author for his clarity, of Quranic, concept of war. And he said a Muslim soldier fighting in a Muslim army cannot be considered, for a Muslim state, cannot be considered a true professional unless he takes on the colors of Allah in all his activities. Now, mark his words. He is not talking of Pakistani soldier fighting for Pakistani state, which would be a perfectly legitimate exercise. He was talking about a Muslim soldier fighting in a Muslim army for a Muslim state. This is that this is what Iqbal was, talking about when he opposed nationalism, because the focus is elsewhere. It's the Islamic unity. Kashmir, General General Munir in his speech mentioned that Kashmir is the jugular vein of Pakistan. Now, this was nothing new. This is what Jinnah had said 75 years earlier. But it's a very funny statement when you say Kashmir is the jugular vein of Pakistan, which means Kashmir has no choice. It's part of Pakistan. And this is how Pakistan has continued to treat that piece of territory. Sheikh Abdullah in his memoirs, Flames of Chinar, has mentioned an anecdote. When Jinnah went to Kashmir sometime in 44, he was asked by a National Conference activist, some young boy, about, wishes of Kashmiri people. And Jinnah's terse reply was, let the people go to hell. And this characterizes Pakistan's Kashmir policy. Now, we have, deletion of Article 370 was criticized. Pakistan made a song and dance about it, went all over the world. What went unnoticed was that a year ago, under 13th Amendment of POK's constitution, Pakistan has assumed direct legislative and executive powers over 32 subjects under POK's constitution. And even on the remaining 22 subjects, Pakistan's consent is required, which essentially means they have hollowed out both azadi and autonomy of POK from within. And in case of Gilgit-Baltistan, it is much worse. All the legislative and executive powers are vested in the Prime Minister of Pakistan. This is worse than, Congo in brief, before the First World War. It was not simply a Belgian colony, it was a personal state of King Leopold, which is what Gilgit-Baltistan is. there have been recent protests in Gilgit-Baltistan, and there were two major issues. One was the water usage charges. For the same molecule of water, where Muslim of Pakistan gets 1 rupee 10 paisa, POK, Muslim of POK gets 15 paisa, 1/7 the price. So obviously they are a lesser Muslim. Now, this agitation has been going on for years. This is not new. This is for more than 20 years. So they have slightly revised it. Now the gap is little less. They are given 1 rupee 10 paisa. The rate for the Pakistanis have been hiked to 1 rupee 58 paisa. But the problem is that nothing has been paid since 2018. So in the recent discussions in WAPDA, which is a Water and Power Development Authority, the question WAPDA people asked, they said that, we don't know under which account we pay. So when it came to using their resources, you don't, wonder under which account you pay. But when it comes to payment, then you start, scratching your head. I'll end with last point, and this is 2 points. One is that, the current struggle between Imran Khan, army, and TTP. Actually, the Taliban are more consistent. Pakistan supported Islamic Emirate in Afghanistan. Taliban are saying, why not Islamic Emirate also in Pakistan? They are actually more consistent. And this is the nub of the problem. It's not urine line. It's a much bigger issue, Talibanization of Pakistan. And the struggle between Imran Khan and Asim Munir and TTP, it's about who controls the narrative, who controls the interpretation of Islam. Because where religion is the source of legitimacy and power, whosoever controls that interpretation has the ultimate power. So this is a much deeper problem, and we will, what is a fearful, scary part is that how far this mindset has affected their nuclear posture. Now, on the nuclear posture, in Kargil, on 29th May, Pakistani Foreign Secretary Shamshad Ahmad said that we will use any weapon in our arsenal, which was a reference to nuclear weapons. Now, Pakistan's red lines say that they will use nuclear weapons in case, Indian army dismembers Pakistan. Now, here was a case, or there are, four thresholds, the space threshold, there's a economy and so on. Now, here was a case where, going by Pakistan's own interpretation, there were no Pakistani forces on the Indian side of the LOC. And yet they were holding out the nuclear threat against India. So Pakistan's red lines are deceptively defined as defensive posture, while the actual policy followed is very aggressive. And the last point, and this is, goes back to the issue of ideology versus national and linguistic identities, which is at the base, which is the basis of the current problem which is going on in Balochistan. And one of the clearest and most symbolic, Balochistan, I'll not go into details. I was present in Karachi in 1992 when Operation Cleanup began. And this was symbolically very important because Muhajirs who created Pakistan became a victim of Pakistani army 40 years later. So this is the ideology of Pakistan, which first affected the minorities. Now it has shaped that country's policies, foreign policy, and it is now affecting minorities within India. Now, interesting part is the ideology of Pakistan is not defined in the constitution, but it defines the constitution. In 1972, there was a very famous case. Bhutto dismissed two provincial governments headed by National Awami Party in NWFP in Balochistan. He also banned National Awami Party, which was the principal opposition party. Wali Khan went in appeal to Pakistan Supreme Court. And Pakistan's Supreme Court said that National Awami Party was against the ideology of Pakistan. So it upheld Bhutto's action. Now, the interesting part is this decision was given in 1972 when Pakistan's third and current constitution had still not come into existence. So the ideology of Pakistan overrides and predates Pakistani constitution and Pakistani state. Thank you.
So friends, you have had some excellent presentations, and I think today we had a good almost 1.5 hours to discuss the, as he said, the deeper impulses which drive Pakistan, and also the genetic issues in India and Pakistan relations. So I don't have to summarize them, you have heard them. But what are the implications for us in future? That is, I think, what we need to be worried about. And what came out from these presentations is that I think the space is now almost completely disappeared. And now it is a complete, India versus Pakistan, which will play out in many domains. And with the geopolitics also having changed. And he mentioned the nuclear deterrence, and he mentioned Islamization impulses of the Pakistan army, the sidelining and oppression of the minorities. And I think the struggle within Pakistan for its own identity, because identity has been defined in terms of Islam and the ideology of Islam. And which means those who are in power will do their best to defend that at any cost. Otherwise, Pakistan itself would disappear. So this will have huge implications for India, both in terms of India-Pakistan relations, for regional politics, and of course the internal situation in India as well. So I think we have we'll take about half an hour. We'll finish it at 2, so there's some time. So kindly make your comments brief, and if you have pointed questions, please address them to the authors. I will just come to all of you. It will help me if you make your questions brief. I'll take 3 or 4 questions in one round, and then go back to the authors, then 1 or 2 questions later, because I know the way it develops, I think half an hour is not sufficient. But if you want to be heard, kindly make it brief, and we'll ask the others to. Yeah. So, इनसे शुरू करते हैं आप.
Yeah, as a layman, I have a couple of questions. Number one is purely hypothetical. There was a time when academicians had advised that we should declare POK to be Pakistan's and make it de jure instead of just de facto. Had it been done at that stage much earlier, now of course it's irrelevant. Would the West have supported us? Would the UN have supported us? Would it have helped? That's one question. And the second question is, how significant is Pakistani army's role versus the politicians? And how much can we blame the West and particularly America, what they've done with Muhammad Yunus and so on, in supporting the army? Had they not supported the army, would there have changes made in the Pakistan polity and their attitude towards India?
Okay, Suresh.
Very brief question. We have 2 excellent diplomats here who have engaged with Pakistan both in terms of policy and implementation. My question is that it seems that we have to have a hostile Pakistan as a neighbor for a very, very long time to come. So what are our policy options? Perpetual hostility? Or is there going to be an end, some kind of an adjustment to be able to live in peace?
Okay. I'll come.
Yes, so my question is something similar, essentially addressed to Mr. Satish Chandra, who spent such a long time dealing with Pakistan. And, from what he, talked about the book and everything, but it leaves us with this feeling that the options for dealing with Pakistan have closed out uh, in the current circumstances. Is there a way in which we can change that? And if we can't, then is there a case now to review our nuclear posture?
Okay. That, yes.
Sir, morning, sir. My question is for Ambassador Satish Chandra, sir. Sir, we have got a glacier about 80 kilometers long in J&K. It is called the highest battlefield in the world. And the living conditions are very, very bad. We have lost hundreds of soldiers there. Now, at one point, our politicians, they wanted to hand over the Siachen Glacier to Pakistan free of cost. I've not understood. I've visited Leh Military Hospital at least 3-4 times. And except having tears in your eyes, it's very difficult to see those soldiers having lost their either arms or fingers or legs. They're lying, hundreds of soldiers are lying. And their life is horrible because the parents, it is very difficult for the parents from the villages to visit Ladakh and visit Leh Military Hospital. And why are politicians of, I openly say Congress politicians, they wanted to hand over the Siachen Glacier free of cost to Pakistan?
Oh, thank you very much for these books, and I congratulate both the speakers. Myself, Umesh Kulsrestha from Jawaharlal Nehru University and Deputy Director, South Asian Nitrogen Center. In fact, in both the talks, lot of issues were raised, but I thought I found the issue of sorting out relations with Pakistan was missing. Is there any way now SAR can be revived? Because I work on air pollution, and when you see the Punjab, Indian Punjab and Pakistani Punjab, right, lot of biomass burning, crop residue burning is happening, and more number of fire counts we see in Pakistan, and air pollution has no boundary. So transboundary pollution, we are affected with that one. And for that, we need dialogue with Pakistan and how it can be done. That is my query. Thank you very much.
So, okay, thank you very much. I must say I'm very glad with the questions asked, and better still, a lot of friends who have asked those questions. So, my pleasure. So, I will start off first. I'll bunch them because I think 2 or 3 were on the same lines. What are our options with Pakistan? Why can't we have peace with Pakistan? It would be good to have peace and a good relationship. Look, I have invested a very substantial part of my career. I was twice in Pakistan on postings. I have dealt with Pakistan from headquarters as Under Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and Joint Secretary. And with people like Anil Wadhwa and myself and Dinkar, we've handled Pakistan abroad also in various capacities. There is no one more deeply invested in wanting a good relationship with Pakistan. And we have spent enormous amount of time in negotiations at different levels on different issues. The options of getting a good relationship, getting a dialogue going, etc. Yes, you can get it. It will be optics. You can have a dialogue going. What are the end results? And my own conclusion, which is the gist of this book, is that you are not going to get anywhere because the DNA in Pakistan is based on hostility towards India. People from Nehru onwards, and Nehru knew Pakistan, evident from the quotation that I gave. He wanted to deal, he made huge concessions. Indus Waters Treaty was a huge concession. Got you nowhere because of the DNA factor. You are right. This book has not dealt with the option that we have or how I feel, and my own feeling I know is not shared by many of my own dear friends and colleagues, is a much harsher approach to Pakistan on the basis of what I have seen, I have experienced, and I have studied. And as long as Pakistan exists, it will be a problem for you. Does this mean that we go to war with Pakistan? No. And in fact, the solution towards Pakistan is in another earlier book, which I had written called A Life Well Spent, where I have outlined on the basis of my assignments and experiences with Pakistan is how do we handle this Pakistani problem. As long as Pakistan exists, the hostility is a given because of their DNA. No matter how much negotiations you have, and you had negotiations on every issue. On Siachen, there were 8 or 12 rounds of talks spreading over 2 decades, from 1986 onwards till 2012 or 2013 there have been talks, as on many other issues. They are going to cause you problems. But it doesn't mean we have to go to war with Pakistan. I think the present government's approach is the correct approach, which is that you adopt a harsher, more punitive approach. And what I had outlined in the earlier book was, it's a terrible thing to say, not war. Short of war, you can totally undermine the state very fast without moving a single soldier. You can have a program vis-a-vis Pakistan where the state is identified, and the state is today ripe for disintegration. You have a very active and live rebellion, if I may call it so, in insurrection in Balochistan today. Every day you pick up the papers and much of the news you are getting is censored. It's an absolute total revolt that is going on. In Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, it is close to that. You have the TTP, which is very active, and that is now inside the state. I referred to the Afghan problem that Pakistan is having. The TTP is really within the Pakistani state. They are saying we should have Sharia law. And that is the game that is going on. You spoke about Kashmir. In Pakistan occupied Kashmir and the northern areas, only recently there have been demonstrations and there's great unhappiness. So the steps that I have mentioned, and I've mentioned 8 or 9 steps that we could take, would undermine that state. And I think that is the only solution, because as long as Pakistan exists in its present form, nothing is going to happen. I may mention that I have had discussions in the past while I was in the system with seniors and people in authority who argued with me when I said what I said, that civil society in Pakistan is now changing. And civil society, we need to win over, and therefore a harsher approach is not in order. I was overruled. Fine. I responded at that point in time. I said, I hope you are right and I am wrong, because no one wants peace more than I do with Pakistan. I am from that area and I have a bond with that area, quite honestly. But the fact of the matter is that civil society in Pakistan, in my analysis of Pakistan, has been brainwashed. And I'll give you two instances of this type of brainwashing. One is recorded in Mr. J.N. Dixit's book, which some of you may have read on Pakistan, where he mentions that he visits the house of a very close Pakistani friend of his who is within the system. And while they are talking, their little son, 6 years, 8 years old, comes. And he goes round the table shouting, Hindustani kutta aaya, Hindustani kutta aaya. I mean, this is recorded by Mani Dixit in that book. What is the second one that I'll tell you, and then I'll give you the rationale of why civil society, how I feel civil society is brainwashed. The second instance is terrorism. Pakistan bleats and tells the world that, you know, we are the most seriously affected country by terrorism, and probably correct. They are. Why? Because they've bred terrorism. And if you breed vipers in your backyard, the vipers will bite you and they're feeling the pinch, and it's not a nice thing. So when I was High Commissioner in Pakistan in the late 90s, I spoke to one or two people who I was very free with and could speak frankly on India-Pakistan relations. And I said, you know, this terrorism business is something you shouldn't be doing. It hurts you. Response: yes, it hurts us. We know it hurts us, but it hurts you all right also. So if we are going down, if we take you down, mission accomplished. So this is why I, over the years, have come to the conclusion that you cannot have a relationship with them. How have they been brainwashed? I have seen this over 3 decades of a service career. I was first posted in Pakistan from 69 to 71. I was in Karachi, as a Dinkar knows, and that is one reason why we have a special bond. There are other reasons also, because we work together on international issues. But from that time to the time I was High Commissioner, 3 decades later, I found that the same brainwashing was continued. Pick up a paper, and particularly the Urdu media. The English press is a little better now. It wasn't very good when I was there first. It is a consistent brainwashing from the entire population, and particularly in schools and colleges. The curriculum is tailored to breed hatred. The 3 quotations that I read to you are testimony to that. And for me, also writing this book was a learning experience, because I was able to validate my own thinking by what I was reading of what about our leaders, some of them thought. So that is the answer. Have a look at the other book also, because there I have given in more detail the solution. This book was not meant to address this. This book was merely giving, as Arvind rightly said, a primer on the basic issues, some of which are forgotten, like partition. People have forgotten that. People have forgotten the evacuee property issue. The water issue is a critical one also, where it's gone in at some length. So that is that. On Siachen, that was the other question. On Siachen, you're right. It is the highest battleground, but I would submit that even the Manmohan Singh government wasn't intending to do a sellout on the glacier. I dealt with this issue in an earlier incarnation in the 80s. Through the 80s, when Arvind and I were working together, I also dealt with the Siachen issue. And I was very closely involved with the Indian Army at the highest levels in order to develop our own thinking on Siachen. And you are right. In the initial phases, 87 and thereabouts, we were taking huge casualties in Siachen because of adverse weather conditions and the adverse sort of location. Uh, at that time, we were prepared and we were very seriously looking at a deal on Siachen. And the only way you can do a deal is to have demilitarization, which means that the soldiers will disengage at Siachen. We will move away from the Saltoro Heights, which is what controls the glacier. We will move away from the Saltoro Heights. They were not there. They will move away some distance beyond. And the point was to decide what was the extent of move away and to which points you will move away. And there was a long debate on that. And the Pakistanis, and here is where I say maximalist agenda, they were not prepared even to indicate the point from which they would withdraw and to clearly delineate the points to which the movement would happen. And then, of course, there was the terms, the monitoring, etc. That element had to be fixed also. So there were many elements in it, but the Pakistanis had a maximalist agenda. I know during Dr. Manmohan Singh's time, they said they will make it a peace park or something to that effect, a high zone peace park. Now, I'll tell you how our thinking went. Till the time we were nuclearized, we realized that if we move away from Saltoro, and if there is the Pakistanis once again go away from an agreement and want to come back, they can get there much faster than we can. Because the terrain is such that within 4 to 5 days they would get there. We would have to come from much further behind. And we would not be able to occupy the heights. So the only way to challenge them, should they break any agreement we have on Siachen and play dirty with us as they usually do, was to have a war elsewhere. That option went away in 1998, once the two countries became nuclearized. In my mind, from 1998, moving away from Siachen, by Siachen we mean Saltoro Heights, because those are the places. Siachen is much lower. It's the Saltoro Heights which are at 23, 24, 25,000 feet and thereabouts. That's where you would move away. To get back there is impossible unless you have a war to drive them out. And you cannot do that in a nuclear environment. I do know that during this has been recorded by former Foreign Secretary Sham Saran in a book, because he was negotiating it with his counterpart around 2007 or thereabouts, in which he says that their foreign secretary agreed to delineate and put down markers to the points to which they would go down. And that had been an objection earlier by us. He says they had come to that understanding, but the CCS, Cabinet Committee on Security, did not approve of it at that point in time. He mentions, I think, Mr. Narayanan, and then Army Chief also has been referred to in his book. But my own take on that, and I have commented on that in my book, is that if Pakistan was serious on demarcating the points, what prevented them from so doing in subsequent talks? Because there were talks till 2012 and 13 also. There were further rounds of talks on Siachen. And my own take on it, of course, I don't know, I wasn't present there or in the system, is that often at official level you may reach an understanding which subsequently is not sustained for one or another reason. But my own view on Siachen is that even if the Pakistanis agree to put markers on points to which both sides will withdraw and make it a part of the official agreement, even so, this will not be a good thing, because you what I said earlier, you are in a nuclearized environment. I may tell you that in 1998, when the seventh round of the Siachen talks was held, I was still dealing with that issue. I didn't come to Delhi for the talks. I was in Islamabad. But from my previous knowledge, when I asked some of my colleagues is, what was the problem now? Because the terrain has improved. I mean, the logistics have improved and we are not taking the casualties. And he said, no, I don't think they are serious about it. But my own thinking was that once you go nuclear, one should not get into this sort of a thing. On the question on the Pakistan Army's role, it's very clear. Pakistan Army always calls the shots. There's no question about that.
Dinkar, maybe you would like to comment on any of this because we'll have to close it now at 1 o'clock. And any other point you wish to question?
No, well, I think Ambassador Satish Chandra has already summed up this, and I entirely agree with him that there is no possibility of having normal relations with a state which is based on on an assumption of unremitting hostility to India. I have brought out what Iqbal said, and incidentally, Iqbal probably has much more influence on today's Pakistan than Jinnah. And let me just add, again on Iqbal, because he's so important in that it's not simply a question of philosophy. Iqbal was opposed to idea of nationalism based on territory. It was nationalism based on religion, what he was advocating, and that too a pan-Islamic concept. But in the same speech, he asked for a state for Muslims in Northwest India. He mentioned Punjab, Sindh, Balochistan, and WFP. He omitted Muslims of Bengal. He omitted Muslims of central provinces. Muhajirs or Bengalis had no place in his mindset. And that is what today's Pakistan is. It's a Punjabi dominated society. And this is state this is why it is within the state, there is this perpetual conflict between Punjab on one hand and the other four nationalities, that is Pashtun, Baloch, Muhajirs, and Sindhis. Let me also mention, we were discussing the issue of ideology and Afghan policy. There are, skeptics that ideology cannot be overplayed and Pakistan has made accommodation. But you look at Afghanistan, and this is the clearest example of ideology trumping both strategy and interest. Pakistan joined Coalition Against Terror under Musharraf in 2001. This was under threat because the Americans had threatened to bomb Pakistan back into Stone Age and destroy all their nuclear assets. So he agreed. In over next 20 years, they received $20 billion. And yet they went on undermining American-backed dispensation in Kabul. Now, risking its relationship with its most important foreign policy partner goes beyond any definition of military strategy or interest. But there's more to it. By 2006, TTP had reached Swat. So Taliban were affecting Pakistan's internal security, and still Pakistan went on supporting Taliban. So this is cannot be explained in terms of either military strategy or interest. It's simply the ideology. And what we have to worry about is that if this has permeated the higher echelons of Pakistan's decision making, and Pakistan has nuclear weapons. That is, what is the threshold which will trigger an irrational reaction? And this is what Parvez Hudboy has debated in his book. The Iqbal's damage he has done to that country. The faith has trumped rationality. Nuclear deterrence is based on a calculus of interest and risk. This matrix breaks down where you think that you have a higher call. And this is recorded by none other than Stephen Cohen, a very sympathetic pro-Pakistani writer, an American. And he has quoted in his book an unnamed Pakistani officer who said that nuclear weapons are modern weapons of terrorism. And Islam enjoins upon us to impose its decision. Now, if this is the mentality, mindset, how would you can't reduce it to any rationality. So I'm not very optimistic about any accommodation with Pakistan in foreseeable future.
So thank you very much. Sorry, we don't have time now for hard stop at 1 o'clock. It's been a very interesting discussion, and I wish we could have more of it. But as you can see, I think looking at it in very objective fashion, our experienced authors have concluded on a pessimistic note. And I think nuclear weapons is one big issue. If Pakistan destroys itself, it might destroy with it many others also. That is, I suppose, the conclusion. Because, but one important point which I think comes out is that Islam is not holding Pakistan together. It is holding Pakistani army together and some elite together. So it is in all sorts of mess. He mentioned the possibilities of disintegration and so on. So, of course, we know the economic crisis which Pakistan has been going through, and it's going to get worse. And yet Pakistan goes on, chugs along. One, because of the elite has a total hold. Elite backed by nuclear weapons and backed by Islamic ideology. But one more factor, the geopolitics. I think time and again you see it is the geopolitics. It is the Saudi Arabias and the China and the US and others who continue to bail out Pakistan, and partly because of these very factors, namely the nuclear weapons and Islamic ideology. So India has no easy options. I mean, of course, diplomacy will have to rely on, our security forces we have to rely on, but whether it is going to sort out the Pakistani conundrum for India, I think for that cannot be too optimistic. So on that note, I will end this and conclude this session here with a big applause for our two authors and some wonderful questions that came. And it brought out, I think, the deeper aspects of India-Pakistan relations, which go beyond the normal headlines, etc. So thank you very much for joining us. And we'll continue to have such book discussions. We have some more in line later this month. And please do join us. We are opening up. Earlier, we used to have these book discussions more in the closed setting. But I thought it is a good idea that wider audiences should be involved. So we'll have some more book discussions later this month. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Thanks.
Thank you.